Hello, welcome back to the Arturia Jupiter-8 video series. We're in deep dive season, and today I've chosen this sound animator to deconstruct. Now, you need to trust me, it doesn't necessarily sound incredible right out of the gate, but it's a fabulous example of sound design. This is what we've got. So much going on in this sound, it takes quite some pulling to pieces. And as you can see, as very often is the case with the presets, we've got some interesting galaxy action. It's drawing this kind of spiderweb thing. This is a combination of a sine wave and a square wave, and it's actually a little bit tricky to show you them individually because when I turn them off, it'll kind of get stuck. Now, this is the square wave on its own. I've just reintroduced a very slow sine wave. So now you can see the sine wave strobing left to right. So try to imagine instead of it being a vertical line, it's just the comet head that we followed in the Galaxy tutorial. So the sine wave is moving left to right at the moment. And the square wave is jumping from top to bottom, and so when the square wave jumps from top to bottom and the sine wave is drawing a constant left to right shape, then we end up with these crazy patchwork quilt effect, and it's just really cool to watch. Now, because this is a static graph, it means those controls are always doing the same thing. In other words, LFO1 is always the X output, controlling the VCA, and LFO2, the square wave, which is jumping up and down, is always controlling the high-pass filter cutoff. So let's try to identify each of those in turn. We'll start with the HPF. Here we go. That's basically doing this. So that's with the high pass filter turned all the way up, almost all of the low frequencies are thrown away. And down here, we've got that deeper throb. And when we combine those two things together, that's what that's doing. It's really fast. The VCA at this point in the deconstruction is a little bit too difficult to find. It's a little bit too subtle. So we'll come back to that when we've stripped a bit more away. Let's have a look at the sequencer. Sequencer is a random pattern tied into the filter cutoff. Basically means every one of these bars is applying a random positive or negative modulation to the low pass filter cutoff. We'll turn it off. Still lots and lots going on there, but try to kind of get an imprint of that sound, and then we'll turn it back on. So you can hear doing this kind of business. And now that we've nailed that down, we'll leave it out. Nothing in the keyboard tab. On the effects page, we've got a couple of effects. We've got distortion, and the distortion is being modulated by the x-axis of the galaxy. Remember, the x-axis of the galaxy at the moment is LFO1, and I keep saying at the moment, the graph isn't moving, but if I started to rotate, it wouldn't be anymore. It's the x-axis. Anyway, x-axis is controlled by LFO1, which is this sine wave, pretty fast sine wave. So the distortion is being modulated by that LFO, by that sine wave. I'm going to crank it all the way up. That's what it's doing. Again, there are so many other effects going on, it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint exactly what this particular effect is doing, so we have to A-B between them and go, right, now I can hear what that's bringing to the party, what that particular effect is bringing to the party. Here it comes back in. Fantastic. And obviously it's more subtle than that, but it's still pretty intense. We turn the entire effect off. You can hear how much of an impact the distortion unit is having on the sound. Okay, and that's that done. On to the delay. Delay is one of the easier effects to identify, but having said that, if I turn the delay off, we do actually have a really long tail on this sound. We kind of jump ahead a little bit, but it's envelope 2 that's controlling the release, and we've got a 3.5 second release on this, or so they claim. So that's part of the effect, and then we bring the delay back in, but I can still hear that bouncing all over the place. So we've got stereo effect, tempo times 2, tempo times 5, and those two delays are crossing into each other, giving really interesting bouncing effects. So we've got quite a heavy damping on this one, pulling all the upper frequencies away with the repeated sections, and a reasonable amount of feedback. And now that we've identified the delay, let's take it away. And we've still got a really interesting sound. There's still loads and loads to go at. Listen to all that going on. Okay, next, let's have a look at the LFO. Now, the LFO, I don't know whether or not this is a bug, and I haven't really done my due diligence on it, but when it's in this is in noise mode, which basically means it's going to be generating, it's like a sample and hold circuit effectively, so it's generating random signals. And when it's in noise mode, the light comes on all the time. So in any of the other modes, the light flashes. Not entirely certain why the light comes on, but don't be fooled into thinking the LFO is disengaged. It isn't, and it's operating pretty quickly at 6.2 Hz. Let's find out what this is doing. So like I say, this is going to be random control voltages being fed into various other aspects of the synthesizer. The first one, it's really easy to miss, is a little bit of pitch modulation. There's a lot more of it. It's got a tiny bit, and you can still hear it even down there. Let's take that away. We've got pulse width modulation being applied to both oscillators. Both oscillators are generating pulse waves, so the PWM is going to be applying. And that's a dramatic difference in, don't forget, this is operating 6 times a second. The LFO is sending a completely random signal into this pulse width modulation setting 6 times a second. So no wonder it's having a dramatic effect on the sound. We've got 2 pulse waves here being dramatically modulated. Take that away. We're still not done with the LFO. We've got some modulation over here of the filter. Let's take that away. So now it's a flat static filter. So that's that amount of modulation, quite a lot of modulation being applied to the cutoff. So I'll take this down. Kind of this kind of business. And finally, we've managed to disengage the LFO from the circuit. So that was a large part of the remaining outstanding work to be identified. Okay, we've got that really intense filter cutoff at the beginning. Every time we hit a note, let's find that. So that's here. We've got envelope 1, maximum modulation being fed into the filter, and envelope 1 has a really long attack, fairly substantial delay going down to nothing. So every note has got this intense filter sweep. Take that away. And now we've got this dull kind of sound. Now, can you hear that kind of metallic, almost nasal quality to the synthesizer? That is being achieved with cross-modulation. So what this means is that oscillator 2, VCO2, is being used as a frequency modulator on VCO1 with this slider here. If I take that away, now both oscillators are operating as true oscillators. We've got our 4-foot higher pitched oscillator up here, our 16-foot oscillator down here, and those two oscillators are mixed together. There's one, there's the other. But when we introduce this cross modulation, things go horribly awry, because oscillator 2 is now dramatically modulating. Oscillator 2 is operating at audible frequencies, so in the hundreds or low thousands, depending on what key you're playing, hertz. And that modulation is being applied to oscillator 1, and you get, it sounds like ring modulation, but it isn't. Ring modulation is an amplitude modulation effect where volume is being modulated very, very quickly. This is frequency modulation. So we pull that away, and we finally managed to deconstruct enough of the synthesizer to get to a pretty basic sound. Now then, having done all of that, can you hear that little wobble? Remember right back at the beginning, I said it's a little bit difficult to identify what the VCA is doing. That's what it's doing. A tiny bit of really quick tremolo. The entire preset itself is polyphonic. Ooh, it's so nasty. Fabulous stuff. Jupiter-8 isn't always well behaved. That is a naughty sound. Absolutely wonderful. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications, and you'll find out when the next episode comes out. Hope to see you then. Thanks a lot.